Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to tell you about this podcast. It's called The DK Project, but it's really The Darren Show. The DK Project is a radio show, but without the radio. So sit back, buckle up, and enjoy the ride.
Let's go! Welcome, podcast listeners, to another edition of The DK Project. Special episode coming your way today. We've got Stephen Galloway on the line. He is up to some big things here. I've been doing my homework here. You are you're a mover and a shaker. I like it. I think the main reason that we're talking is you're now moved into the university world. Is this right?
I've moved and shaken all my way from Hollywood to academia, very different environments.
Exactly.
In some ways, not in every way. They're both political.
Well, here's the thing. I love the idea of having you on because we're talking about the clash of two different worlds here, but you've got quite a little background before we jump into Chapman University here. You, where did you grow up?
No, not just outside of England, just outside London.
London, sorry.
Yeah.
So, and then you went to university at Cambridge?
Yep.
How was that? Now that's whole different. I mean, obviously Chapman University here is modern, real sleek, but Cambridge is like old school castle, like big time. And they don't let just anybody in there.
Well, they let me in, so maybe they do.
Well,
it was wonderful and idyllic and romantic.
Oh, you must have some amazing memories.
Great is that it has a system of education which is really one-on-one.
Okay.
Or one professor with two or three in a group. The Oxbridge tutorial system, it's very personalized.
I got to think with that kind of a degree, you can go anywhere, right?
Well, everybody needs a job when they come out. And you know what it is? This is what students don't expect. You come out having spent a few years doing amazing things, directing films, producing them, staging plays, and then you need a job.
Yeah.
Pretty much everybody starts at the bottom and should.
Yeah. But I got to think that having Cambridge on your resume as opposed to my University of Minnesota, you're maybe moving up towards the top, right?
Well, it was lucky for me because it helped me win a scholarship to come to America.
Okay.
And so I went to two film schools. It was less lucky in that the condition attached to the scholarship was that you then had to leave America for a few years.
Why is that?
And I ended up moving to Paris. It's the thing that was done because a lot of third world countries were sending talent here and they weren't going back. So there was a real brain drain. So the visa requirement wasn't to prevent those students from staying in America. It was to make sure they went and worked in their home countries. I actually went to Paris and worked in French television and had this extraordinary experience of having everything go my way and then fall off a cliff.
How long did you have to do that for?
Well, I lived there for 2 years with nothing, and you look back on experiences like that and you can see what you learned from them.
Yeah.
But living through a time of really having no money, I remember at one point just not knowing how I was going to pay the next rent. And I thought, how could I go from this high of Cambridge and the scholarship and America to not being able to pay the rent? Very humbling time.
So what'd you do?
Well, I remember in the end, I thought I actually have to come back to America because certainly some time ago, I don't know if it's as fluid today, which is an interesting thing to explore. You really did feel that things were possible here if you worked hard, if you had some ability.
Yeah.
Much more so at the time in Europe, which was very stratified. And I really wonder if that's still the case.
Really?
So I felt if I can come back to America, I can do okay. And like everybody, you have luck, good luck, bad luck. Things will fall your way, others won't. But in the long run, I can do well here. And I never felt that would happen in France, which was a very bureaucratic and nepotistic society. And what I wonder today, I've been very involved in mentorship programs for kids in underprivileged backgrounds.
Yeah. Yeah, you work with the big brother, big sister program?
Yes, we created a program called the Women in Entertainment Mentorship Program, where I'd go into a lot of high schools in South Central LA, really tough parts of the city, and find talented kids, pair them with top level industry mentors, help them go to university. This is how I got involved in education.
Wow.
And having been in those environments, I wonder whether those opportunities still exist. And that fluidity is still here. I don't know.
Wow. How long have you been doing that for?
About 12 years.
How exciting. Now let's think.
Oh, it changed my life. I mean,
yeah.
It was an odd thing because, you know, before coming to Chapman, I was the executive editor of the Hollywood Report for many years.
Right.
And by accident, I was put in charge of this big, glamorous event we would do called the Women in Entertainment Breakfast. And that meant booking the guests, organizing the program.
Sure.
And one year I thought, you know, we need to make it more relevant. What if we created a mentorship program, which was purely designed to make that gala event topical? And it ended up changing my life, I'm sure much more than the kids, and was an eye opener.
What was the reception from the Hollywood side, from the people that were there? How did people take that in? Because I'm guessing you're doing mentorships with scholarships and, you know, money and time, which, you know, was the most valuable thing to give. I mean, how was the reception? Was there, I mean, obviously on the surface, everybody's like, yeah, great idea. But then when it came down to it, was it just as forceful or meaningful to them as it has been to you?
Yes. I mean, that's the amazing thing. Oh, it changed my view of Hollywood and people.
Yeah.
You don't think that when you're, you know, as I was then, in your late 40s, you're actually going to change your mind about people's basic goodness.
That's major.
You know, I went from, you know, 20 years of covering the entertainment business, you know, where you're pretty much in conflict with people because every time you break a story, somebody is unhappy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's the nature of a scoop.
Right.
To suddenly seeing these very ambitious, very driven people who could often seem hard and egotistical, really putting themselves on the line for a young kid.
Really? That's cool. Yeah. We don't want to jump too far ahead here. We still have to figure out how we made it out of Paris. What was your first like job where you're like, okay, this is, I'm going to make it? I mean, you've got a Cambridge University degree and you've got scholar, you know, I mean, you've done your time in America. Now you're like starving artist. What happens? Well,
I continued to be a bit of a starving artist because the only way to come back was to take a job as a part-time assistant at a small newspaper.
Okay. And was that like the way that they allowed you to come back to America?
My green card, you know, and it was complicated. And it was 4 years of working for no money, running around, you know, doing errands.
Sure.
And I wish I could say that was a happy time in my life, but it wasn't. It was very depressing. And so I actually didn't get a proper full-time job until I was around 30. And then had the experience of being fired. And most people in Hollywood have been fired at some point. If it happens to you, it's not great.
Right.
In 91, there was a recession, so it was also then very difficult to find another job.
And what were you looking for? What was on your, you know, your list? Like, this is what I want. I'll take this, but this is what I want to do. Because at that time, you know, you've probably seen different areas of the film and the industry. What were you after? What was your plan?
My goal was to make films.
Yeah.
Spare time, I was writing screenplays. It wasn't my gift. And so I stumbled into journalism, happened to be reasonably good at it, but it was my sideline. And at some point that tipped. And one day I really woke up. It was astonishing to suddenly have that moment of epiphany where you go, oh, actually, this is what I'm good at. And
where did that start? Where did you get your first taste of that?
Well, I've been doing it for a long time. And I woke up at 47 years old. I know, with the shock of realizing I actually don't want to make films.
Wow.
And I didn't believe it was possible. You know, you hear about people going through change.
Yeah.
And you think, no, this can't, and I woke up thinking, this can't be right. This has been my dream from the age of 13. And I love film.
Yeah.
Somehow it had gone. And
have you written any notable films? Have you done any films? No.
No, I could never make that work. I was always much more comfortable writing prose than screenplays.
Okay.
And so it was a shocking moment, but wonderful, because instead of seeing yourself as a failed filmmaker, you start seeing yourself as a successful journalist, you know?
Sure.
No facts have changed in your life, only your self-image.
Sure. And I suppose you set your goals to be a different bearing, right? I mean, you're now looking at but you must have done something before the Hollywood Reporter, right? So before you got to the Hollywood Reporter, where did you get your taste of journalism that kind of flared this whole thing?
Well, as I mentioned, when I came back from Paris, I got the job at this small paper in Los Angeles, which is how I got my green card. So I was an assistant there for 4 years.
Okay.
By the way, a part-time assistant for 4 years.
Oof.
Yeah.
But you're in Hollywood. You're in California. Things can't be that bad.
You know, people don't realize that if you want to make it in the entertainment business, there is no set path. People have all sorts of ups and downs. And one of the astonishing things I came to find when I interviewed really famous and successful people is how many of those they've had in their life.
Like just strange run-ins or weird occurrences. I got to imagine that the people that you spoke to and you with your experience, it's who you know. It's running into someone. It's a connection. Somebody knows somebody. Because there is no clear path. There is no, I'll go to Cambridge and then I'm going to do film. It doesn't work that way. You got to dig it out.
And then your ability to deliver once you get an opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
There are two elements there. But I've been amazed when you meet very successful people. There's often a turning point where that almost didn't happen. I remember years ago interviewing Anthony Minghella, who directed The English Patient.
Sure.
Won the Oscar. And he spent 2 or 3 years writing the screenplay, had all the money in place, was ready to shoot, and suddenly half the money fell through. And maybe 3 weeks away from actually shooting, it was dead.
Wow.
And I thought, and luckily the rest of the money came in, but it could equally not have done. And I thought, wow, there goes your Oscar. There goes your career. You're back to being a little indie British.
Just like that.
And 3 years of your life gone.
Oof. I don't know if I could. I don't know if I could stomach it. That's a lot. That's a roller coaster ride.
True. I did a roundtable. For many years at the Hollywood Reporter, I did these roundtables with the actors and directors. And a couple of years ago, I did one. We had some very famous directors and a couple of young directors who were very nervous to be on the roundtable. Brand new. Here they are sitting with some of the gods of the business. And what they didn't realize is as we were ready to film the roundtable, I'm getting a little message in my earpiece from the producer saying, you better come out. This multi-Oscar winning filmmaker won't come into the studio. And I went out and he said, you don't want me on this. My film's a flop. I'm a has-been. These guys are the future. And I thought it's astonishing because these guys of the future were the ones who were intimidated by this god.
Wow.
The god is terrified to come out because he thinks he's a has-been.
Wow.
And there's a lot of that,
Oh, I got to imagine there's a ton of that. I don't know. I don't know if I have that thick a skin to, it's such polar, on ends of the gamut. It's like you got ego this and you got working hard this and you got cut here and you got money there. And there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle. Special thanks to the good folks at Grady Restoration. If you're in need of some insurance restoration work, not sure if you have any hail damage, storm damage, wind damage, Give them a call, 952-472-1570, or look them up on the web at GradyRestoration.com. It's that time again, folks. 21 flavors of hard scooped ice cream located in Mountain, Minnesota. The Lost Lake Creamery is going to be opening soon, looking at probably April 7th. Make sure to check out the website, lostlakecreamery.com, located off the Dakota Bike Trail on the north end of Cooks Bay on the Lost Lake Channel. We'll be opening soon. Stay tuned for more updates. Give us a follow at Lost Lake Creamery on Instagram or Facebook for more updates. But you went to the Hollywood Reporter. Now, I had some questions about that. Now, you obviously probably started off as a journalist, pounding the pavement, getting the stories, right? And,
yeah.
So you had to have interviewed some amazing people. Mm-hmm. Which ones stand out to you? I'm sure there's a ton of them, but like just wow. What not just because they're famous or whatever, but because they really made an impression on you and what you felt was a moving piece rather than just blah, blah. You know what I mean? Were there any that just blew you away?
Yes, for different reasons. I'm drawn to people who are very complicated, not always easy or nice. And two of the standouts were Ted Turner and Hugh Hefner.
Wow.
And Turner, I spent a few days with him. He'd given a lot of money to the United Nations. We went to the United Nations together. And he was lonely.
Really?
Jane Fonda had left him. He had 4 rotating girlfriends. They all knew about each other.
Wow.
But none mattered him like she did. He was very open about it. He was still in love with her. And I thought, here's this guy who's a multi-billionaire, who's achieved so much. And yet there was a sadness to him.
Wow.
And that was reinforced because when the magazine came out, it was a very positive piece. He bought 50 copies to send to his friends. And I thought Ted Turner needs to remind his friends of who he is.
Wow. Do you think that's because you're at such a level where people will just think you're untouchable and people just have the impression that, hey, I can't call Ted today. He's probably changing the world. I can't, call and, shoot the, have a conversation about baseball and just chaw on the fat for a little while because he's just at that level. Which
one of the problems with great success is it's very hard to separate your genuine friends from the ones who need something.
Oh, I'm sure. But he's almost past that, isn't he? Where
yep.
But now he's at a point where wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was striking. And by the way, the other one that struck me was sort of similar. It was because Hugh Hefner, who was the most charming guy.
Oh, I got to imagine he was a player.
Extraordinarily generous and hospitable. And same thing, I spent, 3 days on and off with him in the Playboy Mansion. And nice. The Playboy Mansion was this immaculate $100 million house with its own zoo.
Yeah.
Creatures wandering around. Everything was perfect with an element of tacky,
Sure.
And, the gigantic penises, things like that. And he gave me a tour of the house at some point.
That had to be just overwhelming.
Absolutely perfect. And then he showed me his bedroom, which was the size of, your entire house.
Yeah, right.
And it was a tip. Magazines, videos, junk, littering the floor.
Really?
The bed covered with stuff, like a hoarder's place. You couldn't move. By the way, no sex was taking place in this bed, right? There was too much stuff that had been there for weeks.
Really?
And it was astonishing. Absolutely one of the most astonishing moments to enter that room, the shock that hits you. And you think, what is going on inside this man? And my third visit with him was an evening. Once a week, he would invite his friends, and they were genuine friends. He'd have a lovely dinner put on for them. He'd screen a film. And before he screened it, he would tell you a bit about it. He would have done some research. He had notes. He'd scroll down. The one we saw was a Peter Sellers comedy, A Shot in the Dark. And he spoke, and then he sat down between these 2 blonde young women who were his girlfriends.
Sure.
They must have been 21, holding their hands. And then at some point, 9:30, movie's over, he goes to bed alone, says goodbye, and we're all left downstairs.
Really?
And I remember thinking, the King Midas myth is a very powerful one. It's sort of beware of what you ask for.
Right.
Because King Midas wanted everything he touched to turn to gold. Well, you can't eat gold food. You can't drink gold water. And here's Hefner. He has what every schoolboy wants. At least I did. Sexy women all the time.
Right.
What he didn't have was intimacy. Because when you've had that, you can't have intimacy. Intimacy is about getting over an obstacle and going deeper, about dealing with someone and their problems. It's not about running away from this pneumatic blonde to the next one. And so he had everything but intimacy. And now here he is, 80 years old or something.
Was this during the, they weren't really twins, but it was that Heidi and the blondes, the younger blonde. There was like 3 of them at the time, I thought.
I can't remember who they were.
That's just got to be.
They were very nice, by the way.
I'm sure they're.
Yeah.
They're living the life. I got to think that just the people watching and the day-to-day operations of that house or compound or whatever you want to call it, it's got to be pretty impressive. But just like the Ted Turner thing, you don't realize that these are just people that wanted everything. They got it. Now people don't know how to share that with them because they're on a pedestal that's at a different level that people can't relate to. You know what I mean? Where, I've seen that. I've got some friends that are, doing very well and people are different to react. And it's like, they're just normal people. It doesn't, I still, but I got to think that, Ted Turner and even Hugh Hefner, I mean, just, you're at another level. I mean, Hugh Hefner, how long was he? 50, 60 years, 70 years he was doing that? Man, how long has he been gone? Has it been like 5 years now? I can't remember.
I think longer. And what's interesting is, in Hefner's case, he had such a burning need on a very deep psychological level for the world to be different. And he created that world for himself and cocooned himself inside the Playboy Mansion, which had nothing to do with reality, certainly as we know it.
Yeah, right.
And it's an extraordinary thing that the ferocity of his desire changed the world for him.
Wow.
Most of us have to adapt to the outside world. He made the world adapt to him. Now, is that good or bad? It detaches you from reality, but it's also a refusal to engage, isn't it?
Wow.
So for all these reasons, he and Turner were fascinating. One thing that's interesting is those really complicated people you think about for years. You think, did I get that person right in my few visits? Because
it's probably totally different than what the public persona is on the thing that you're digging deeper. And normally people just want to hear about the day-to-day fun girl. But when you dig a little deeper, I bet there's a whole lot going on there, or was. Wow, that's crazy. Very interesting. I guess I wouldn't have thought that, but if you think deep enough about it, it's there. It's different.
The public persona is always different from the private one.
Yeah. Well, and then on top of it, he can't go anywhere or do anything.
One of my young colleagues, the reporter, had, had cut out a photo of this very big star.
Yeah.
Who's decent and noble and extraordinarily handsome, but in real life is an alcoholic, abusive, rude, nasty, mean.
Really?
Absolutely. People would be shocked if they knew.
Uh-oh. Do you know the backside of a lot of people like that? Like,
no,
are we uncovering a book here?
A lot of the stars that I know are human beings.
Yeah.
With good and bad, like everybody else. The ones I love, George Clooney, I spent some time with.
Yeah.
And I admire enormously what he's done, what he tries to do for society.
For sure.
But all of them are human, and they are secure and insecure, driven and afraid, and happy and not happy. Not that different from all the rest of us.
Yeah. Are there any that stand out that are like were overwhelmed? You know, like George Clooney, he's at another level. But are there people that are at that level? Because a lot of times, you know, I ran into this. I was at the gym one time and you know, was in the locker room with a guy, and we had just had one of our football players or whatever was getting into trouble for whatever reason. And I'm talking to this guy about it, and he's like, you know, I got to get up. I got to go to work to provide for my kids and my wife every day. Like, I have to do it. Where if you're a 21-year-old football player who just signed a $30 million contract, you don't have to get out of bed. You don't have to do anything, you know? And I got to imagine a lot of these people that they're talking to in the celebrity world are in that, you know, they have all these yes people around them. They have all this money. They can do whatever they want, whenever they want. And there's got to be a real temptation to the dark side of alcohol and drugs and abuse. And I mean, you must see a lot of that during your time, right?
Yeah. And by the way, I don't blame anybody who has an addiction issue. You know, it's a terrible thing to have to wrestle with.
Oh, for sure.
And I think if you have that nature, maybe everybody's susceptible. I've always been lucky because that's not my problem, you know.
Right.
But if you do, then the stress of public expectations can increase it.
Oh, for sure.
You know.
Wow. Well, how and so what do you miss the most about being at the Hollywood Reporter? Because you're in a whole different world now. You're not even playing in the same sandbox. Well, kinda.
My former boss asked me a couple weeks ago, what do you miss? And I said nothing.
Really?
And she was shocked. Nothing. No, I absolutely love this new job. I can't even tell you. At 60, I just turned 62. It is so great to have a new challenge.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's okay. So you're at the Hollywood Reporter and you're doing all this mentorship and giving back to the kids and helping out. And all of a sudden they come knock on your door and say, hey, what do you think about taking on a class load and teaching at the university? Is that how it happens? Or did you know somebody who knew somebody?
So what happened is that when I started that mentorship program, I started getting very involved in education. And then at some point, a year and a half ago, a recruiter approached me and said, would you be interested in, you know, as the dean, you are like the CEO of the film school.
Yeah.
And I said, yes, it was the natural next step. And let me move to a different level of helping young people, create a new mentorship program, which is in the works now for less privileged kids to be able to come here.
Wow.
So it just took that to a higher level. But I'm still writing. I love writing.
Okay.
You know, I'm writing a double biography of Laurence Olivier and Vivian Leigh.
Wow.
It'll be out next year. I would miss that terribly.
Yeah.
But I actually don't miss interviewing stars. I don't miss the cut and thrust of Hollywood. I keep in touch with a lot of friends.
So on the day-to-day, do you have classes you're teaching, or are you just running the organization, you know, like running?
I'm running it. Yes. Yeah. Not teaching.
Would you ever give it a run?
Oh, I love writing. I mean, I love teaching writing, and most professors in the university only want to teach the advanced classes. Give me the beginning one. You know, that's when you can make a mark. That's when you can give some people some real guidance.
Wow, that's
and
exciting.
I really love teaching. I started off teaching in a community college, and I was very snooty and thought, oh, I only want to teach the really bright intellectual kids. I loved teaching the kids who came from. There was a kid who just got out of jail from being in a gang. He had something to write about.
Yeah. Well, and he's very impressionable too, evidently.
Well, I mean, I remember when he read, the other students read some of his script, and I was praying, oh, please, please, please let him get good feedback. And he got great feedback. And I saw him soar in front of me.
Oh, for sure. Wow.
That's a lovely, lovely, wonderful feeling.
What happens? So when did you take over at Chapman?
Almost exactly 1 year ago.
Okay, so now you know what I'm going to ask. what happens when you get the pandemic call and now we have to all of a sudden change everything? So you're in a new environment and fresh off of dean training and now we have a pandemic. Nobody knows what to do. So how has it changed
things? You're dead right. It was extraordinary. I'd given my notes to the Hollywood Reporter. I was going to leave and take a while to work on my book. The pandemic hits and I thought, I want to jump in there and get my hands dirty immediately. I don't want somebody else tackling this.
Right.
And so the weird thing is they shut down the university. So for my first 6, 7, 8 months on the job, I'd only ever been in my office for 12 minutes.
So how are you? You're meeting staff over Zoom and
everything is over Zoom.
Oh my gosh.
Our life. And so people would talk about offices and buildings and studios. I didn't know what they were talking about.
Let me get my map out. Wow.
Yeah. And even now, I'm on campus now. I'm in my office. My associate dean is in the office next to me. The main administrator of the film school is in the other office. There is nobody else. It is silent. There are no students.
They're all virtual, right?
Yep. Imagine a gigantic studio that is empty, ready for the zombies to attack.
So you've never actually seen it in full production? Like
I actually have, because I was invited here about 4 years ago.
Okay.
By the then dean, who built it from nothing into this extraordinary studio complex.
Yeah.
And did an amazing job.
Wow.
So I'd seen it.
I've seen
and I was very
4 years ago
back then.
Wow. So what's the forecast? When is it all on Newsome when you can let people back in, or what?
No, we'd start letting people back in after spring break at the end of this month.
Okay.
We're expecting to be fully back to normal in the fall.
You will. Oh, that's
yes.
Awesome. Are you going to be ready?
I think so.
It's like getting a whole new job again. You got all this different stuff going on. That's crazy.
The hardest thing is there's a lot of student film production.
Yeah.
And the single biggest challenge you have in my job is you make the decision, when are they going to start shooting again? And is it safe? And you know that your decision is going to impact people's life and maybe death. And that was a tough one.
Ugh.
And I formed a whole advisory committee on this. We hired a full-time COVID expert. And I said, we can't be looking at probabilities. You can't send this Challenger rocket into space saying it's probably going to be okay.
Yeah.
You have to say, and I said to the students, here's my thinking. You're going to be safe. You're going to be okay. But I don't want to be the one responsible for you then going home and passing COVID on to your grandmother who then dies.
Right. Well, and there's no protocol. We've never seen this. We didn't know what to do. Right. And on top of that, you're in a whole new world. That had to be you could write a book about that.
It's tough every week because every week we analyze it. Are we doing right?
Yeah.
And we started shooting. We have unbelievably strict protocols.
Oh, I'm sure.
We have a COVID officer on each set. We have a limit how many students can be there, double masks. And if something goes wrong, we have an emergency phone number, shut down immediately. And this happened on the weekend, shut down. And I was thrilled. Everything went smoothly. Somebody was sick, shut down, get the person tested. And it was a young actress who, as it happened, had vertigo, nothing to do with COVID. And I called her, how did it go? And I called the COVID officer, how did it go? And it's all gone great. The good news is, I just heard this morning, last week, 3,000 people were tested on campus or who work here. 2 were COVID positive, and only one of those was a student.
Wow.
Very good.
Yeah, I think the numbers are on the downside, which is great, which is really going to help your environment because, I couldn't imagine trying to teach these students the way what you're trying to, like that's very hard to do virtual.
Yes.
When you try, there's so much to it. I do some, my real job is voice acting and there's so much to it that's very difficult to not ugh. So I bet you're just ready to get going full swing, get them back in. So that's exciting.
By the way, the hit to the university world has been extraordinary.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's, university has lost $100 million.
Oh.
And one of the ways you use it is students don't come, they decide to defer for a year.
Yeah.
But also, what people don't realize is universities make a lot of money from their student housing. It's all empty. For the very best, student housing is meant to hold 3 people, will hold 1.
Wow.
So around the country, all these universities have been very badly hit.
Wow. Do you think it'll be recoverable in a time frame that's acceptable, or is it like, whoa, rates are going up next year? Like, I got 2 kids in college, so what's this going to do to me?
Well, it's recoverable for us, but there are going to be the haves and have-nots.
Yeah. And
there are a lot of smaller, less established universities where they're going to be really hard hit.
Yeah. Well, and my daughter's at San Diego, and and she's transferring. She's coming back to the University of Minnesota because they've been so restrictive that she can't do anything. She lives in her dorm. She's all virtual, so she doesn't have to be there. But she can't go to other floors in the dorm. They can't do anything. And she's just like, this isn't the experience I wanted. So even to what you were saying, the people who do go are like, this is not what college was supposed to be for me. So, we need to make some changes. And
it's not because of one crucial thing, even more than what you're able to teach hands-on. Like if we teach, this is how you use a camera. This is how you would film these acts in the studio. Even more than that is university is this transitional experience between child and adolescence and being fully grown up.
Exactly.
And it's teaching to be away from your family, to navigate on your own, to deal with other people, to form relationships in a fairly safe environment.
Right.
This is what we're taking away. We can teach all sorts of things online.
Right.
I can get you to read Aristotle or to watch, Jaws and analyze it.
Right.
We have editing teachers who have an amazing software. Somebody emailed me just before we started talking, a cinematography producer. He has lit sets with dolls and they look like a real thing. All that you can do. You can't take away this social melting pot that I think is a crucial part of a university.
Oh, for sure. And that was one of I've got a son who's a sophomore out in Phoenix, and then my daughter's at San Diego as a freshman. And it's like, even his experience, because he got caught in the middle of his freshman year, it's like, and now they're starting to loosen up and they're starting to like build relationships and have that actual, experience of going to a university, which, I mean, hey, that's why we're paying all the money. You can get the education local, unless you're going to go to Cambridge, that's different. But you know what I mean? Like you can go local here and get a marketing degree, but you want that experience. And that's what's hurt the most is like, you hate to waste that valuable time. Like you said, transitioning from an adolescent to an adult, because you can't get that anywhere else. That's what the universities are there for, And I
think a good university absolutely embraces those things.
Yeah.
When I was at university, there was the debating club. You would put on plays. There were all sorts of people became very famous actors when I was at Cambridge. Emma Thompson and Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie. They were all friends there.
Nice.
Study abroad, which I think is an incredibly important part of university.
Yeah.
All these things are not detachable from the formal education.
Right. And I admire that. You really took on a big chunk there. We don't have a lot of time with you yet. I wanted to ask a couple of questions. Back to the Hollywood Reporter. Because you saw the time when we went from printing everything to digital everything. What was that? I mean, obviously it was a hit. There's no denying it. But how much did that change everything from day-to-day operations to the big picture? I mean, there's a lot of, I know locally here, some of our newspapers and some of our print stuff is just, why even waste the time anymore? Nobody picks one up. Is that as obvious on the backside as it is on this side?
To an unbelievable degree. And by the way, we're in the middle of that revolution.
Yeah.
We haven't come out at the other end, if there is another end. And it's had an extraordinary impact in several ways. First of all, within any news organization now, everything is about the online product. And the print, I get the New York Times delivered, but it's going to go. It's only habit. If you're in the online world, there are lots of things that are different. First of all, in the old print world, you were delivered the important news on page one. In the digital world, your eye scans a lot of stuff and chooses what you want to read.
Right.
So it's a much more down up, you could say democratic approach to journalism. Secondly, every reporter, consciously or unconsciously, knows that he or she's being measured by how many hits and readers and clicks he has.
Right.
So there's now not just the important or thoughtful story, there's, am I engaging readers?
Because they can break it down by who's clicking on what story so they know who's reading what.
Sure. You see that all the time. When I was the reporter, we had screens up showing what the most read stories were at any one point.
Yeah.
And how many people were reading. Now, the readership is thousands of people more than it was in print. The Hollywood Reporter had, 30 to 50,000 daily circulation when it was a daily trade, 70,000-ish when it became a weekly magazine. It's got 24 million uniques per month online.
Are those paying subscriptions online? No. Just people's perusing.
And that's the next step that everybody's transitioning to, because journalism made a gigantic mistake when the internet hit. It put everything out there free. And the assumption was that the culture of the internet was free. We need to put it out there.
Right.
And now everybody's putting it back in the bottle. Because it's fine to give it free, but who's paying for your hard costs?
Right.
Your multi-million-dollar budget.
Well, and that's
not sustainable.
Well, and that's my next question is, you're at a top 10 film school. I mean, you're teaching some of the brightest future in the industry. Yeah. I've just started watching a comedian that I follow writes on this show called The Crew, which it's on Netflix. It's just a whatever comedy. But do you think we're seeing a lot of that same thing when you can produce, I think it's an hour-long show on Netflix with no commercials? But, there's a lot of the prominent, Pepsi bottle all of a sudden in the shot or the back of the Apple computer. Do you think that's kind of where we're headed with advertising in? No.
I don't. Absolutely not. I think that, first of all, the streaming world has completely changed the entertainment universe. Number one, the amount of money they're spending for production, for content, is astonishing. Netflix last year spent $16 billion on product. Apple, Disney Plus, all these companies, Amazon, they need to do that. They're not making money from it.
Right.
They're in a competition to survive.
But are they pulling that off of subscriptions then?
No, at the moment, they're all in a loss-making game. But they're competing with each other for two reasons. Number one, everybody believes that ultimately there'll only be a handful that people subscribe to. So you want to stake yourself as the Disney Plus, the Netflix, and then one of the three others that's going to get your subscription dollars. But there's another reason that people are not talking about. If you're Jeff Bezos and you're running Amazon, you know perfectly well that as soon as Disney Plus really gets established, they're going to be using that television screen to let people buy products. And when you're watching Mulan or Soul or whatever it is, or The Mandalorian, and there's a little sidebar next to it that just lets you order, first of all, Mandalorian socks, right?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
A Pinocchio nose.
Yeah.
Well, that very quickly gravitates to, I'll buy a book on Disney Plus. I'll buy my groceries. And Amazon is dead. Because why we go to Amazon is ease of access.
Right.
We've all given the more 3 clicks and got a book. I go there all the time. It's easy.
Yeah.
If I can do that and I'm watching it on television. So Apple and Netflix and Amazon and Disney are ultimately in a universe of consumers who will use that to purchase, to do other things.
Wow.
So what I'm looking at is, you've seen the entertainment business go from having a handful of major studios in its origins, by the way, which survived 100 years, Fox, right, Columbia, Universal, to being taken over by conglomerates. So Columbia becomes part of Sony, Universal becomes part of NBC and Comcast.
Right.
You are now going to see these being part of global empires that are all about shopping and access.
Follow the money.
Right. And so if you can give ultimately, and I don't know what the time frame is, if you can give your possible consumer a Pixar movie free to get him, it's like Jeff Bezos is giving free shipping.
Yeah.
Guess what? This is, okay, we're going to throw out 200 million or 300, whatever that costs, to get you to come to us and subscribe to us, because you're going to start making that your portal to the entire universe.
Wow. When do you think we'll start seeing that?
Game.
When do you think they'll start getting into that?
Partly it's based on technology.
Yeah. Because you got to have a way to
based
navigate.
On the shakeout of who dominates that entertainment world. Because otherwise you say to yourself, why on earth would Apple want to be in this game?
Right. Wow.
This is where they're going. And let's look at the speed at which this happened. Netflix, just a few years ago, was mailing DVDs to people. Right.
Right.
Now it is the biggest entertainment company in the universe.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about 50 years from now. Let me make an analogy. You look at the invention of the printing press, and I've studied this in detail to see what I can understand. You look at the past to understand the future.
Mm-hmm.
When Gutenberg invented the printing press, the dominant literary art form was the illuminated manuscript. There were monks sitting in monasteries around Europe, painting gold letters on Bibles. There was a factory operation to create books, and each one took an enormous amount of labor. Gutenberg creates the printing press. Within 20 years, there were 1 million books in publication. Within 50 years, an entire industry and art form, the illuminated manuscript, which had been around for hundreds of years, was dead. This is all the result of the internet.
Wow. But when is it going to be too much? It seems to be going faster and more, and you know what I mean? Like look at Bezos or look at the Amazon. I mean, these are companies beyond imaginable. And now
I don't know the answer, because if you look at past revolutions, there's been a static situation, a revolution, and then there's a new world order.
Yeah.
The Industrial Revolution, everything was, we lived in an agricultural society. The Industrial Revolution takes place, and 100 years later, we're in a mechanized society,
right?
Which then remains pretty stable. I don't see us coming out on another plateau. I think it's going to be change and more change and more change and more change.
It's just going to keep happening. Wow.
Right.
Hey, we got to let you go. You got a heart out. I can't thank you enough for all the time. You've been a joy. So much good information, man. I dig it. I had no idea we were going to go in some directions, but boy, was that interesting. We may have to have you back on once you're back to full service in the fall. Boy, that's actually, they're coming back after spring break, huh? You got to be ready. That's
I may be worn out. I may be a completely different person when you see me next time.
You'll be more gray and oh, this is crazy. Exactly. So everyone needs to go out and check it out. I've Don't know who's been on the cusp, but they need to get over there and check out your university, man. Top 10 film schools. That's a big deal.
Number 4, most recently at the RAP, which is really quite something. And most importantly, we are rising.
Well, now that they have this new dean there with
and a few other people
with some wind under his sails, once they let you meet the students, that'll really be big. So, Stephen Galloway, we thank you so much, man. You take care, stay safe, and good luck after spring break.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care. That's it. That's the end.
That's a wrap.
Read the shtick.
That's a wrap for today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and tell all your friends. If you'd like to reach out, you can use the studio line at 612-504-6500 or by email, thedkprojectpodcast@gmail.com. And of course, there's always social media at the DK Project Podcast. Thanks for tuning in.